Here we go. Okay, happy Friday, Will. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. This is
Here we
my first
are.
podcast, so this will
Yeah,
be.
it's your first.
Yep, yep.
Well, good. This is a good place to start because it is casual space,
Yeah.
not formal interrogation space. So we'll have fun. I promise.
Yeah.
Well, no, this really is a great place to start because we have a lot in common, and therefore we have a lot we can share and talk about our mutual love for space,
Yeah.
our work at NASA, which you are there currently,
Yes.
really doing something fantastic. So
Mhm.
before we get to what you're doing now, where'd you go to school? Where'd you grow up?
Sure. So I'm actually from outside of Philly, and for the majority of my life in college, I lived, right around the Philly area. So I went to Drexel University for undergrad, and I did
Nice.
got a bachelor's in mechanical engineering, and then I went to the University of Delaware, and I got my master's in mechanical engineering, and then I decided to go all the way to University of North Dakota, where I'm working on my Ph.D. Um,
Wow.
yeah, yeah,
Oh my
it's
gosh.
in aerospace sciences.
You just can't be in school long enough,
Oh gosh, I'm kind of ready. Don't tell my advisor. I'm
right?
kind of ready to,
You're
have
ready.
a full-time job at.
And so what drew you out to North Dakota? Did they have the programs and this place that you wanted to be?
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to work on spacesuits. That's kind of been a passion of mine for a long time. And the spacesuit program at UND is kind of really special in that it's one of the few places that one actually does spacesuit research. And that's changing somewhat. But at University of North Dakota, we kind of build the spacesuits up from the ground up. So getting that experience of, the making a spacesuit design, purely from nothing, and getting to actually experience the issues of fabricating it and putting it together and putting
Wow.
people in the suits and testing it out is really unique experience that is pretty
And
much
that was
only
the
happened
place.
at UND. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, so let's get into it. All things suits. And this is not
Sure.
the first time on the podcast we've talked about suits,
Mhm.
but it is the first time we're going to get into the weeds in such detail. And Will, I'm so grateful you're going to help walk us through this all because I think
Sure.
when it comes to spacesuits, people get confused. And I
Oh yeah.
like how sometimes we say things like, um, it's like an external house that you wear. It's so
Yeah.
much more than just clothes, right? It's
Oh,
keeping you
totally.
alive, it's keeping you pressurized, it's doing all these things. It's checking boxes more than just something that you're wearing, that you're donning. It's got
Yeah.
a lot going on. So, we've got fabrics, we've got life support systems. Where should we start?
Well, so the suit in my mind is divided into two kind of connected but separate systems. So you have the pressure garment, which is the human shaped, bubble or, volume that the astronaut puts on. And then you have the life support system, which is called the portable life support system, which is, if you think about Apollo or the EMU, that's the backpack. And the EMU is the current spacesuit that the United States uses, along with a bunch of other
Okay.
countries.
Okay,
Yeah.
hold it right there for our listeners.
Yes.
Pressure suit. Why do we need a pressure suit?
Sure. So when you go to space or the lunar surface or Mars, that there's almost no air, and so you kind of have to bring that air along with you, and well, particularly oxygen. So you need oxygen to survive, and so the spacesuit is kind of you know, roughly speaking, a human-shaped balloon that provides you enough air to survive,
Love
but
it.
also provide your body needs to be, um, to function,
Squeezed.
your body needs to be in air.
No, that makes sense. And so for all the kiddos listening and all the students, it's like when you fly in a plane and the plane is
Yes.
pressurized because you're going higher up into the atmosphere and this
Oh
needs
yeah.
the air to move around you. Okay, so we got the
Yeah.
pressure suit and
Well, and actually, speaking of planes, that's where the first, some people draw the lineage of spacesuits to high altitude suits. When they
ah,
started going high enough that there wasn't enough air to survive, so they started wearing these pressure garments to help them fly higher and then faster. So yes.
Nice. Okay, and I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but you've been in some of these, right? You've tested some suits
Yes.
and you've worn them. Okay. Pressure
Yeah.
suits, are they comfortable? Are they nice? Do they feel like a extension
Um,
of your skin and yourself? Or are they
no,
not
so
comfortable?
when you pressurize it, if you bend a balloon, right, that requires a certain amount of work that you have to work against the balloon. And so part of that is you're stretching the materials. Some of that you're compressing the air inside of the balloon. And so the same thing happens with spacesuits. And so part of spacesuit design is designing joints in a way that minimizes the amount of effort you need to bend the joints, but it still is there. You still have to work against the suit.
I
Um,
see.
so when you have an astronaut doing a 6 to 8 hour extravehicular activity or spacewalk, it's they're exercising for that entire duration. So it's really quite exhausting.
Now, I've seen you, Will, in some of these suits in some really cool locations. Walk us through. I know there's the second part of the suits. We haven't moved on from pressurized part yet, but you've worn them and I've seen it on social media. What are you doing in these suits? Are you testing? Are you playing? Are you experimenting? What's up?
Sure, sure. So I've worn a couple different suits. The majority are suits we have at the University of North Dakota. So we have higher fidelity suits, or more realistic suits, because they're made for research,
I see.
that can actually be fully pressurized. So it actually, you're working against that human-shaped balloon, and you get to experience that. But we also have some less realistic suits that we use for our analog habitat. And so those
Yes,
are pressurized, but not nearly as much as an actual spacesuit. And so I'm sure we'll touch on analogs at some point, but
you bet.
those suits, we do analog missions, which are supposed to replicate some, but not all aspects of a space mission, including spacewalks.
Love
And
it.
so, when we do our research with the analog suits, perhaps we're testing a method of repairing a habitat, or recovering someone. If your friend gets injured on a spacewalk and you need to bring them back to the hatch, how can you do that in these really bulky suits? And so that's kind of the two instances we have suits here
I
at
love
UND.
it.
Yeah.
Yes. So, okay, so there's a lot of people who are like, I want to wear a spacesuit. I want to go to space. And to be honest, Will, as you know, there's a lot of analog folks like me
Oh
and
yeah.
you who want to be in a spacesuit and play and adventure and explore because it's probably as real as we're going to get, to be honest, until we
Yeah, yeah,
go, right?
yeah.
But here's what's fun is it always surprises me when someone puts on a suit. They instantly go from like, okay, this is a little more real, and holy
Yeah,
cow, is this what it feels like? Or this is heavy, this is restrictive, this is serious. It's
yeah.
like you want to until you do it. And in my experience, I had a great suit. I've had a couple of suits, but the one we wore in Poland, and I
Mm.
can't wait to talk about your analog too, was a homemade suit.
Oh
And it
yeah.
was semi professionally made by Paul Bakken, and he's just brilliant. But the
Mm.
suit was sealed. And once
Okay.
it was sealed, I kind of started freaking out, Will. I
Right.
was like, so how do I get this off? They're like, you don't. You ask someone
Yeah,
to come over and unseal it for you when you're ready. And I'm like, oh, that's next level. And
yeah,
I
yeah,
was like, it felt like I was in a fishbowl, and I felt like the suit itself was comfortable. I could move, I could breathe. There was nothing unsafe about it. It was
yeah.
just something your body in nature isn't used to,
Take some
being
getting
protected
used
and
to.
pressurized that way. And then it
Yeah.
happens and you almost have to adjust mentally. Have you had that experience too?
Yeah, I remember I kind of psyched myself out before the first time I went into a spacesuit, because
Yeah.
just this, you're going into a very confined area. And I watched, I think it was one of the Mythbusters who put on a spacesuit, and I remember he had a bad experience. So I was like, oh my gosh, am I gonna have a
What
bad
happened to
experience?
him? I didn't see this
Um,
one.
Yeah, I think he had the claustrophobic reaction,
Oh,
because you're getting into the sealed suit, and then there's lots of sounds, and then it's restrictive. So
it's true, right? It's
yeah,
a
yeah,
real thing. So
yeah.
you saw that and you were thinking, "Oh, just get
Oh
ready."
no.
But that's not what happened?
I think in my mind it started to do it, but I kind of just took it slow. And I've had a friend who had a similar experience where you just take it slow, and then we have a little valve on our suits so we can let in fresh air. And so,
Oh,
we let
good.
fresh air if they need it, and then we don't zip up the hatch unless they're really,
Okay.
kind of doing
Oh
okay.
my gosh. But
Yeah,
truly, it's an experience. It plays with your mind and it
yeah,
feels like it's very weird. It's being caged or being cut off, like you said. And then that
yeah,
fresh air is everything. You're right.
yeah,
Okay. So we do things in suits because we're human beings and we're
yeah,
walking sacks of biological mass. So
yeah.
we sweat and our pores need to breathe and we have joints that need to move. And sometimes we have a rash or an itch, or sometimes we have to bend a certain way, or our chest has to expand with a sneeze, or
Mhm.
our gut is going to be digesting. So all of these things are taken accounted for in a suit. And
Yes.
we were just starting to talk pressurization and move into the other parts of the suit that we are going to wear really comfortably so we can, wear and live in them. What are the next parts of the suit with the fabric and all the things that are going to allow our body to be as natural as we can?
Sure, sure. So underneath the actual, human-shaped bubble or balloon, so to speak, you wear what's called a liquid ventilation and cooling garment. And so one of the issues in the spacesuit is due to the extreme temperatures of space, you pretty much completely insulate the human or the astronaut, and then you have to deal with all the heat that that person creates.
Mm.
And so we solved that issue by using the liquid cooling garment, and so that flows cold water over the body of the wearer, and then takes that heat to the life support system. And it also has helps ventilate the suit, so it's sucking air from your hands and your feet and elsewhere in the suit just to keep the air moving throughout the entire volume, so there's no pockets of bad air.
This
Uh,
sounds lovely,
yeah.
especially like if I live in Texas or when I lived in Texas, I would love
Oh
to
yeah.
have worn something that kept me cool all the time. Now
Yeah.
we know there are garments that do this naturally just by the fabric and the materials
Yeah.
they're made, but we're talking actually pumping
Mhm.
water through and across the material. So you're
Yes.
not
Yeah.
feeling the water. It doesn't actually feel like water's going over you. It's just cooling you, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So if you're just wearing like a sports shirt that's made out of some specialty fabric, that'll just evaporate your sweat. Whereas this, it's dealing with your sweat by taking it through the life support system, through the ventilation loop, but it's not. That's not how it's cooling. It's yeah,
It
the
sounds like
cold.
something I wish, I'm sure athletes everywhere are like, why hasn't this been invented yet in like the track suits or stuff? I mean, we want things on our body to help and assist us and protect us, but at the end of the day, this just hasn't been, the design hasn't been perfected for us to have in everyday like
Yeah.
activities,
Well,
but sounds like it would be cool.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think the issue is you'd have to have the backpack portion. And
Oh,
so if
that
you're,
tricky little part.
yeah, if you're running a marathon, I don't know if you want like
Could you
the,
just see Shaq wearing a backpack, coming down, bouncing the basketball and
oh,
being like, I'm cool, I'm nice, good temperature, but also
yeah,
got
yeah,
this thing. I mean, it would be like he's already huge.
yeah,
Speaking of huge, you had mentioned earlier all sizes. We're all human sizes. So
yes.
are they ever will gonna make a kid's astronaut suit?
I think it has to happen eventually.
Yeah.
I think over time, we're seeing our group of astronauts grow. So if you look at the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, they were all, military test pilots. And then finally for Apollo 17, we sent like a scientist. And,
A
and so,
regular size person.
yeah, yeah. And so, you go from that to the shuttle, and, the shuttle system, it's designed for a wider range of people. But the astronaut corps is still kind of based off of a very specific type of person,
Mhm.
over the age of 30, usually fairly fit. And so if you follow that trend to where we're going with commercial space and, more people being able to go, suborbital and then orbital and then, lunar or Martian, we're going to have to fit, a lot bigger group of people. And so I think,
Yes.
once we're on Mars and, kind of having a settlement, then I think we might have a kid suit.
Yes, absolutely. We need all those sizes because sometimes the kiddos can get into the spaces we can't or do activities that tire
Yeah,
us out or they have
the
more energy. Or
chores.
maybe, Will, I'm totally serious when I'm asking, like, do they use less of the cooling? Do they breathe less of the air? I mean, how does it work? Is it like half the size equals extra efficiency?
Yeah, so just talking them from a consumable point of view, I know that the amount of heat a person generates is kind of related to their volume. And so if a little kid would definitely be less volume, so they would generate less heat, and so you would have to use less consumables to cool that spacesuit.
See?
And so
Okay.
yeah, I think there's definitely benefits. It might be difficult to get them the technical skills needed to, succeed at the moment, but
Yeah,
maybe
moms
further.
everywhere. I can hear them all
Yeah.
across the universe going, "Whoa, don't put that kid out there in radiation and damage them." And no, no, keep them safe. But I love you. I mean, you even use the word human bubble, human air bubble. I love it because it's a
Yeah.
good explanation for walking us through the suits. Okay. So now we talked about the cooling system. We talked about the first couple layers. What's
Yes.
next?
Yeah, so the cooling system is directly connected to the life support system.
Okay.
And so that's that backpack I was talking about. And so that does a number of things. One, it does your communications, which people don't think about as life support, but that's what it's considered. So it handles the communications, it air conditioning. So it takes out that humidity, so when you sweat and it evaporates, that's going into the air inside your bubble. And so
Kind of
you need a
important.
system that'll take that out.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, you're also breathing out CO2.
Mm.
And so CO2 is poisonous. So the life support system takes out that CO2. And so it does all that. And then there's the coolant loop. So it keeps that water cool, and then it actually takes that heat and releases it through either sublimation or evaporation into space.
And what are
Um,
those two things? What are those?
Sure. So if you think about evaporation for cooling, sweating, and then if your sweat evaporates into the air, that's taking some of the heat off of your skin with it, as that water goes from liquid to gas.
And so it's doing that through the suit, through the backpack process of filtration.
So the backpack has a supply of water, and the current suit uses a different system, but for the lunar and Martian suit, this is what will happen. It will take water and evaporate it into space, and then that will create a cold area where you can send your liquid cooling garment water past. And so
Oh, I get
you'll be
it.
constantly
So
cooling
cool. Okay.
uh, the coolant garment water
Very
through
cool.
an evaporator. Yeah.
Okay, so the one was evaporation and the other
Yeah.
one was
Sublimation. So sublimation is, instead of going liquid to gas, you're going from solid to gas.
ah.
Um, yeah. So if you have a block of ice and you put it into, kind of a vacuum like space where there's no air, and then you heat up that ice, it'll immediately go from ice to gas. Um, and that transition takes a lot of energy.
I
And so
see.
that energy is, it finds that energy from the warm water running past it, uh,
Okay.
for the coolant loop.
This is a lot going on in the backpack.
Yes. Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, it's kind of, it's definitely an area with a lot of the stuff going on right
You're like Beth. Will's like, Beth, you have no idea. I have a whole
now.
PhD on this, and then
Yeah.
some. And
Well, it's funny. I'm just starting to get into the life support system because I've been
oh
on
yeah.
the pressure garment suit, and that's where I plan on staying. But I'm like, okay, I should have a working understanding of the rest of the suit, just so I can talk about it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's intricate. It's detailed. There's a lot
Yeah.
going on. That's why people see a suit and they think it's like this one thing. And really, it's a
Yeah.
myriad of many things, but and layered as well. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So now we've got, okay, the pressured suit, the cooling system, the
Yeah.
backpack, the life support system. What's next?
Let's see. So we haven't talked about the outer layer of the spacesuit. For the lunar spacesuit, that's called the Environmental Protective Garment, or it's the EPG. And
Love
so
those
the
acronyms.
EPG is, kind of a very complicated, garment or wearable piece of technology. And you mentioned layers, and so there's tons of layers in the spacesuit that help you deal with the temperature extremes, the the extremely harsh lunar dust, impacts from micrometeoroids and orbital debris. So the spacesuit actually is designed to be hit with, small micrometeoroids and deal with those successfully. And just abrasion and all of this while being, closely attached to the suit and able to move and, do all the things that the suit needs to do. So that's and the due to the that's where the insulation comes from. So the portable life support system depends on the this protective layer, to
Now
drive the performance
this
forward.
outside layer, will do we have to keep it clean? Like every time, is it advantageous to wipe it down and then go back out, or is it expected to get dirty and dirtier?
Sure. Well, so in microgravity on the space station, it hasn't been too much of an issue. But when you go back to the moon, it's going to be huge. So I mentioned the really tough lunar regolith, or the lunar dust.
Yeah.
That was very problematic for the Apollo missions. So Apollo 17 had the most EVA time of any of the missions. So they did three EVAs, totaling 22 hours, and those suits were, beat up by then.
Dirty.
Yeah.
I've
And
seen
so
some in the museums, and you're like, did they go to the
yeah.
moon or did they go to the swamp?
Yeah, yeah. And those are cleaned up, like they clean them up and make them
Wow.
look pretty. And so, yeah, if you think about you're staying on the moon for a month and you're going out every other day, the dust is going to be extremely problematic. So yeah, there's people looking at how to clean the suit. I One of our professors actually designed this system where they put carbon nanotubes into the fabric of the suit. Yes. And since the lunar regolith is electrostatically charged, so if you think about peanuts, like packing peanuts,
Yeah,
and you take your new toy out of the box and the packing peanuts stick to you.
I'm
Um,
following. They're all
yeah, lunar
sticky.
dust does the same thing because it's bombarded by solar radiation and there's no atmosphere for that electric charge to leave the particles.
What? So
Yeah.
it's almost like okay, let me just see if I can connect this. It's
Okay.
almost like these new dryer sheets they're trying to sell us, where they're like, if you have a lot of cat and dog hair, wash your clothes and put them in these dryer sheets because we're going to build up a thin coat of film onto your clothes so that that cat hair doesn't stick to your clothes. Is this true? Is that how it works, roughly?
Yeah, I think
Bit
probably
of a
pretty
stretch.
similar. I haven't used the sheets, but yeah, a similar thing. But
So
this
cool.
system actually creates an electric field that will levitate the dust up and off of the fabric of the suit.
Then
And
how do
so
you capture that dust when it levitates? You mean just like very little on the surface level, what can't see with the naked eye, so you can wipe it off, kind of deal?
well, it's actually pretty dramatic. So if you have some on your shoulder, it will fall off.
Get
It'll
out of
be sticking.
town.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
I love it.
Yeah.
This is again just another example of when we go to space and we explore and we figure out these technologies that can benefit us here on Earth. How
Oh yeah.
cool. And is it because there's so little moisture in the regolith that we're able to slough it off, and it's not sticking?
Well, so the particles are charged, and so this system uses that charged nature by creating a electric field that will, um, you know, create, I don't know how much you want to get into electrostatics, but if you have a positive charge and a positive charge, if you have two magnets that are the same polarity and you try to
Hmm.
bring them close together,
Sure.
or two poles of the same
So it's
polarity,
that simple. It's just
yeah,
you're just creating another situation for that not to combine.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
so cool. Wow, in the clothes, in the garment. This is great.
yeah,
Okay. What else? Okay, so we're talking about how it protects
mhm,
you and we're talking about how it covers you.
yeah.
Um, do you know much about the helmet and the extremities, like the boots, the gloves? Are they the same material? Are they different? Do they have to be less protective, more flexible, or even more protective because we're humans and we cut up our
Mm.
hands and our knees and our scrape up our toes and boots? What are those like?
Sure. So starting with the boots, because I think that's really interesting because we're going back to the moon with the Artemis program. And so part of the Artemis program and why it's a lot going to be more, more challenging than Apollo is we're going to the south pole of the moon where they have these craters. And inside these craters, there's these areas that never get any sunlight. Um,
Ooh.
yeah, because of how the moon orbits the Earth and doesn't, yeah. So there's we call these permanently shadowed regions, and they've done analysis on these permanently shadowed regions, and it can get as cold as 50 Kelvin, which is really really
Mm.
cold.
So colder than
So
Chicago and North Dakota?
yeah, yeah.
Just a little.
Yeah, yeah, might not feel colder. But so very, very cold. Um, and so these boots need to be able to handle walking around in these shadowed regions for, yeah, a significant period of time. And so a lot of work has been done into designing boots that are going to be able to handle this extreme environment. And so, if you're putting a boot in that situation, stuff like flexibility and, stuff like that is maybe less of
Sure.
a concern.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
So they're
so
like
those are
the
boots.
ultimate Uggs.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
But we know because seriously in Chicago and okay, so and North Dakota,
Yeah.
it's you can be comfortable if your feet are dry
Oh
and
yeah,
warm.
yeah,
Once your feet are wet, I mean, even if your feet are cold, but if they're cold and dry, still good. If your feet are wet, but wet and warm,
yeah.
still okay. But cold and wet, you're
Uh,
done.
yeah. Well, that's the thing is, coming from Philly, the winters there, it's when the snow melts, that's when it's really miserable. And
Yes.
so North
And you think you
Dakota,
can get away with a pair of sneakers that day until you step in that puddle
yeah,
or snow melt it. Yeah,
no, no.
right. And you're
So
like,
so
oh,
in
my
North
day's
Dakota, it
done.
stays frozen.
I'm done. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or if you, yeah, it's true though, Will. And then, or if you think like, oh, it's almost spring, I can wear something a little less covered and
yeah.
nope. And you just get that first thing of wet or you get splashed. It's truly, truly, your day is miserable. And unless you have like a space heater under your desk or something to
Oh
warm your
yeah.
toesies, it can ruin your whole day. It's so funny as humans that we're like, now I got to go 8 hours with my socks wet. And it's so
Oh,
silly. But I mean, in all seriousness, as you know, and as you've studied, even on an analog, we don't even have to talk about space,
yeah.
extreme space environments yet. Even on an analog, you're going to be doing something in hours in a covered suit or apparatus. You will be miserable. It will be
Oh yeah.
harder. You won't have your focus. You'll take your mind off the mission or the task at hand. And in
Mhm.
space, that can be really dangerous. If
Oh
you're
yeah.
uncomfortable, it can be dangerous.
Yeah, well, and you're thinking about the psychological aspect of it. You know, I remember in one of my missions, or yeah, it was we were headed towards the 2 week mark, and I remember getting into the suit, and it was tough getting into the suit, and I was
Uh-huh.
just like so frustrated. I was like, ah, you know, just very, it's not what I wanted to be doing at that
It's no
moment.
fun. Oh
Yeah,
my gosh, tell
and
me about your analogs. What have you been doing?
sure. So I did a mission for ILMA. So UND has their own analog called the Inflatable Lunar Mars Analog Habitat.
Cool.
Yeah. And so it's actually has about the same volume as the International Space Station, which is wild. It has a core module. It has a number of modules. It has a habitation module where people sleep, eat, and you know, kind of do a lot of tasks. It has a EVA access facility with a working suit port system. So that's where the analog astronauts can get in their suit and then go out into you know, the simulated lunar Mars
Sure.
environment. Yep.
Yeah.
We have a plant growth module,
Oh,
and so we've done
nice.
a
I
lot of
bet that
work
was
with.
everyone's favorite, just to
Oh
see the
yeah,
plants and the colors. Yeah.
well, and just getting the, you know, UV light, and because it's so highly lit and you're
Yeah.
inside all day, so just getting that, you know, the missing light is nice.
How long did you do that analog?
Yeah, so that was only two weeks, but we're starting to increase the duration of our missions to like a month, and then, you know, ideally we want to go past that. But you know, as you can imagine, it's fairly easy to find people with 2 weeks, you know, but
Yeah, sure.
you know,
It
like a month.
is.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah, and it's good. I'm so glad you did that because it's puts your research in perspective. It helps you
yeah,
understand what you're doing in the field and how it applies from the lab to the field or from theory on
totally.
paper or in your mind into actual practice. So good. I think everyone should get the opportunity and the chance. And I think everyone has a breaking point, Will, and you
Yeah.
can design such a great suit, something so comfortable and it's like kind of wearing a hug. You just want to feel protected. I know my husband just got back from he went down to Destin, Florida, where he took a free
Oh,
diving class.
oh,
And he
geez.
had never he's worn a wetsuit before, but just kind of here and there. And it's the kind you can buy at any store, anywhere to just
Yeah.
put on to have warmth, right? The wetsuit he had down there for his course was next level. And it was like an addition, it was like an addendum to his skin. And it
Ah,
was soft and flexible and
oh,
thin.
nice.
And he said it just felt like he had that extra layer when he was in the ocean. And
Huh.
mentally, he said that was just, it put him at ease because let's say a fish or a thing or
Yeah.
anything just rubs up against you. Well, you're already freaking out because you're in the
Yeah.
ocean and you're trying to like get your spatial awareness and your environmental, you're just taking in tons of input or you're taking in actually the opposite of lack of input. So you're kind of
Ah,
freaking out like, okay, I don't see plants. I don't see, because it's so much blue and open water
yeah.
for so, right? For minutes at a time and nothing. And so
Mhm.
that suit gives you that comfort mentally. It gives you the physical comfort and warmth, but it also just felt like a protection unit on you. And he was
Yeah.
just like, there's no way I could have focused on the class and my breath and getting, cleared when you have to clear
Mhm.
your self and get down and get back up. And all of that just took such mindfulness and awareness. And that suit just gave you that
The
level
space
of
moving.
comfort, protection, and putting your mind at ease. It's so funny that clothes can do that for us, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Do you
Huh.
see people one thing we didn't talk about yet is the suit that you can wear that's not for outside space, like inside the habitats. Do you
Mm.
work or look at or examine any of those for comfort or
Um,
use or practicality?
sure. So there's a couple things that you wear inside the spacecraft or the habitat. So on the space station, they actually wear normal clothes the majority of the time. They have a flight suit, and they actually don't do laundry, so they end up
Right,
wearing
right.
those for like a long time. And they use their flight suit for kind of public experiences,
Mhm.
you know, yeah, public, you know, ex, uh, yeah, but Okay.
Downlinks and outreach.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
yeah.
got it. Yeah.
Downlinks, yeah.
And all the
Um,
pockets. You need all those pockets.
oh yeah, for your pen. Yeah, you
Yeah.
need to have it right on your shoulder.
Yeah.
So there's also a different type of spacesuit called the launch and entry type of spacesuit. So when you think about SpaceX with their sleek,
So good
very
looking.
yeah, form-fitting
Mm-hmm.
spacesuit. You have to realize that's kind of functionally a lot different than the big bulky, spacesuit that they're using on spacewalks. And so there's starting to be more overlap because SpaceX is going to do their first commercial spacewalk, hopefully in December, through the Polaris Dawn mission. So I'm super excited to see what that suit
Yes.
looks like.
Yes, me
Um,
too.
yeah, yeah. But the mobility needed to do a spacewalk, kind of requires a bulkier suit to build in all of those joints.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so it's neat to you said something incredible. I think people forget you can't do laundry. You
Yeah.
can't. So when
No.
you're, I mean, even on an analog, I remember in your 2 weeks too, I bet you were like, okay, so which thing am I wearing again today?
Yeah.
Because you,
Yeah.
we simulate as close as we can to reality. And it's also water is so sparse and you just don't want to, that's, you're going to drink it or reheat your food or meals with it.
Yeah.
So something as vain as being clean laundry just wasn't going to cut it, not on the priority list, but it will
Yeah.
when we go. I mean, we're not going to be able to bring tons of heavy mass and heavy weighted items such as
Mhm.
clothes. So we will have to design and figure out how to rewear over and over again some of our stuff
Definitely. Yeah,
or
yeah.
Febreze.
Yeah. I'm kind of hoping they put a shower in. I don't know if you know about the Skylab missions, which is
Yeah,
where they repurposed a stage of the Saturn V rocket, but they actually had a shower in the Skylab mission, which is
all
so
day.
luxurious. I gotta
All
show
day.
you.
Well, that's my jam. It's like I did come back. Our commander said, "Okay, what have you learned from the analog?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I use too much everything, too much
Oh yeah.
water. I leave the lights on and all this stuff." And I'm like, "I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna change my lifestyle and I'm gonna totally
Of
implement
course.
this new shower, a
Yeah,
warm
yeah.
shower, especially in Chicago in those icky winter weather months we talked about. You just want to, you're
Uh,
cold to the bone, you're damp, you just need that, warmth. Oh my goodness.
something.
Okay, so, well, when you were little, did you always know that this was going to be something you were going to study and get into? Did your mom catch you like wearing winter coats like a spaceman around the house, or did you gradually fall in love with this particular field?
Yeah, well, the funny story about that. Apparently, when I went to Kennedy Space Center as a kid, I was very excited to see the astronaut. But actually, no, I was really interested in medieval suits of armor. Um,
Really?
yeah, yeah. So I wanted to be a blacksmith. Um,
Oh,
and I actually did competitive sword fighting in high school and undergrad.
get out.
Yeah, so I have like a suit of armor that I used to wear to sword fighting.
Sword
Um,
fighting
yes,
is a
yeah.
thing at your high school.
Yeah, so it's part of a larger group called the Society for Creative Anachronism. And so the kid fighters start with foam swords, but then
Okay.
the adults use rattan, which is kind of solid bamboo. Um,
What?
and so, you have your suit of armor, you have like a shield, and then, you have your stick, and then you go try to, get the other guys.
No
So,
way. So you were
yeah.
like a Viking from the start.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I was a German mercenary unit from the 1500s, but
That's so cool.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. Well, now I see this beautiful connection. Plus, truly, Will, making a suit like a
Mhm.
blacksmith is an art. I mean, you have
Oh
to
yeah.
form it and fit it and shape it and make it. And doing a spacesuit is very similar. I mean, it's going to be, there's an art to it and a
Oh
whole
yeah.
level of patience and technicality. So, okay, so you've always kind of been in this field.
Yeah, 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 exactly. And if you look at medieval suits of armor and spacesuits, there's actually a lot of similarity in the joint design. So the medieval
Really?
artisans needed to figure out how to have the shoulder move
Mhm.
and encase it in rigid metal, whereas in spacesuits, you're kind of building up a structure of fabric and, also metal and different types of materials, that'll allow the shoulder to move as naturally as possible in this rigid structure. Because when you pressurize a spacesuit, it gets pretty rigid. So yeah, there's a lot of overlap.
Who would have thought? See,
Yeah.
I love this so much on a Friday morning that we would connect metal armor to modern day spacesuits. It's
Yeah.
so cool. Okay, so where are you in your PhD journey? And when you're done, what's your goal? Do you want to be building, designing suits, testing them, or
Mhm.
tell me where you're at?
Sure. Yep. So right now I'm heading into my fourth year, and so I know I'm
Yes,
very excited. So
the
the
days are
goal,
counted down, right?
yeah, yeah, the goal is next spring to graduate.
All right.
Yeah. So I'm gonna push pretty hard to do that. And so moving on from that, my professional goal is to work on the Martian spacesuit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because I think going to Mars is such a turning point for our species, because I kind of liken it to the discovery or harnessing of fire, because it's kind of before that we were one thing, and then after it we were something else.
Oh, wow, that's so powerful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, before we went to Mars, we looked at the moon and went there the once, hopefully
Yeah.
soon, again return. But
Yeah.
your eyes are set on Mars. You're like, we've done the moon, let's get to Mars.
Yeah. Well, the moon for me is a training ground for Mars.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think we need to go back. We need to learn a lot of lessons, particularly, kind of suit durability. Like I was talking about, Apollo got to 22 hours of EVAs. If we're on the moon on Mars for over a year, those spacesuits are going to get used a lot. And so whether that means suits that can just survive that, maybe for like 3D printable suits, like we're working on UND, maybe being able to print the suits on the surface of Mars as needed,
Wow.
kind of figuring out that technology and getting it ready. So then we go to Mars, we're not, 22 hours into, the experience with our suit falling apart.
Right.
And then as our orbital window to go home, fades away. You
Right?
know,
Do you see
yeah.
us when we do go to Mars? Do you see us having these personalized custom suits or a one size fits all still just to get us going on the Mars for the first few years?
Yeah. So I think it's going to be personalized. So I think there's a number of reasons for that. One's mission duration.
Okay.
So right now there's two types of Martian missions. There's the short stay, and the long stay, depending on, and this is due to the orbital mechanics of the Mars's orbit around the sun and Earth's. And so the short stay is about a month. But NASA says it's not worth going to Mars unless you do the long stay. And so you can get to multiple geological locations and perform a whole lot of research. And I believe the long stay is something like 500 days on the surface of
I would
Mars.
think so because it's 2 years in that orbital rotation to get closer to Earth to launch
Yeah,
back and have a shorter journey, right?
exactly.
No, I'll
Yeah.
still take the short stay. Thank you.
Yeah, honestly, I think that might be the move. But
Yeah.
if you are expecting to do a long stay, you're gonna have a spacesuit that's gonna be used almost every other day, maybe every third day. So you're doing
Yeah.
hundreds of EVAs with a single suit, and then you're taking it to Mars and potentially back. So I think that's a big thing. There's like we touched on earlier, a wider population, I think, will be going to Mars. And then one final thing I kind of think is not given enough weight is having that suit available for the future generations. So if you go to the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, you can
Mhm.
see Neil Armstrong's spacesuit. You can see Buzz Aldrin's spacesuit. But if you look at the shuttle and the space station era, they had a modular spacesuit system where the spacesuit components were swapped around.
Yes. Yeah.
So when you think of iconic spacewalks that happened, like Bruce McCandless's untethered EVA,
Hmm.
the EVA to repair the Hubble, we don't have those spacesuits to look at. They
Yeah,
haven't been preserved. And so I think, we should have those Martian spacesuits, so we can say like this is, the boot that walked on Mars.
agreed.
And there's something about the shape of the spacesuit that captures the individual. And so talking about suits of armor, if you go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, there's a King Henry VIII's suit of armor there, and you can kind of get a feel for him at that period of his life, because it's when he was older. I don't know how much you know about King Henry. So during the end of his life, he got very rotund and unhealthy. Yeah, and so you can kind of see that in his suit of armor.
Really?
And so I think, kind of the suit can act as a portrait of the wearer in some
That
way.
is so artistic. Will, I
Yeah.
love that. It's so true, though. It's like, wow, when we go, there'll be the first suit, and then we'll evolve into when we were staying there sustainably. And that suit will look different and have different features and
Yeah.
will look different. Maybe we'll be taller, to be honest, because we expand, right,
Oh
in
yeah,
space a
less
little bit,
gravity.
or maybe we'll be taller, thinner, maybe we'll be different. Um, what do you think? Have you seen the suits that have like, this is what I'm noticing. You're the
Mhm.
expert, so please go ahead and laugh at my expense at what I'm observing in trends. So it used to be like traditional low cut neckline, snap on head apparatus, but
Mhm.
everything kind of fit and sat on the shoulders. And now it looks like the suits kind of come up and over your shoulder and
Yes.
kind of protect the back of your head, and they don't start kind of coming over and making that turn. And your head is kind of into the suit rather than
Yes.
a bowl that's sitting on top of your shoulders and it's open and you have like this whole 360 of ability to turn your head and look.
Yes.
Now it's more like your whole body has to turn because the suit is engulfing your head and protecting your brain. Am I noticing this trend correctly, or is it
Yeah, so I don't think I don't so there's you kind of move around. So the torso of the spacesuit is called the hard upper torso.
okay?
So the way the person moves in the uh so okay, so the current spacesuit, the extravehicular mobility unit, you enter through the waist of the spacesuit. So you
Okay.
put
Mhm.
on the lower legs like pants, and then the upper torso kind of like a shirt, where you come in through the bottom. And so moving on from the EMU to the XEMU, which is the
Okay.
Exploration Extravehicular Mobility Unit, that's going to use a rear entry hatch where you get into the spacesuit from the back.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of driving a lot of the shape changes that you're seeing, where there's kind of a lot more volume around the shoulders.
Yeah.
Um, and so one of the reasons you would do that is to have a suit port. And a suit port is a type of airlock where you can actually dock the spacesuit to the habitat or rover or a space station, and you get in and out of the spacesuit through a hatch in the back.
Love
So
it.
you don't have to, put the suit in an airlock and then bring down the air pressure to, space.
I see.
You can just get in and
Jump
out,
in.
yeah, and just close the hatch,
Not
undock.
jump though.
Yeah.
Ease in. Ease in.
Yes. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
see. That's so cool. Is this very similar to what NASA has at JSC, where they have like that roving car laboratory on wheels and then the suits attached to the back and you can go straight through the car, out the back into the suit if you want to jump in?
Exactly.
That is so cool. I'm not using the technical terms. I know, I apologize, but
Oh,
just
that's okay.
seeing that was just pretty clever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was invented by this guy named Mark Cohen, and he's done a lot of cool stuff with space architecture. I got the pleasure of meeting him. He's a very eccentric
Oh,
guy.
good. That's so cool. Okay, so Will, if we're like days away in the
Yeah,
spring to your final receiving of your PhD,
yeah.
and then you're off to the races, What is the perfect job working? Because how does one just work on Mars spacesuits if we're still, I
Yeah.
mean, is there like a lab somewhere? I know I'm being facetious a little bit. I'm kind of reaching, but do you go with a major company that's already planning to be on Mars, or do you have to kind of develop technologies and get buy-in for that? And then
Yeah.
they pay you and that's your job? How's it going to work for you?
So I'm definitely leaning towards more industry.
Okay.
So when you get a PhD, you can do academia, which means you go become a professor, or industry where you actually go do research and development. So I'm leaning towards industry. And so I'm kind of, so right now they just put out a contract for new spacesuit to replace the EMU and to kind of fill the role of the XEMU. So to a new space station spacesuit and then a lunar spacesuit. And so there's a bunch of companies working on that. But right now, I'm also doing an internship with the Anthropometry and Biomechanics facility at NASA's Johnson Space Center. And so
Nice.
that's kind of cool because I'm getting to kind of develop tools for evaluating spacesuits. So that way, I can kind of, create a technology that can be used to help get us back to, the moon, while also learning lessons that'll get us ready to go to Mars. So, there's it's kind of like a booming period for the spacesuit field. So I'm kind of
Yeah, you're right at the cusp.
yeah.
How exciting. How do you
Oh
like
yeah.
going from like North Dakota to the hot, swampy Johnson Space Center
Oh
environment that's
yeah. Yeah.
you
Last
know.
fall I was on site for my internship, and I think it was around November, and I went to one of my colleagues and I was like, "Oh my gosh, do you guys ever get fall?" And he just laughed and said,
They're
"No,
like, this is fall.
yeah, this is it." Yeah,
It
yeah,
is. It's so different, right?
yeah,
And yet, yeah, it plays with your mind and your feelings. You're like, oh my gosh, it's just so hot and humid. You can't
yeah,
even, it's so hot. Well, but for someone like you who's going to be in these extreme environments, testing extreme environmental
yeah,
wear and protection, I mean, you're getting all of them all at once.
yeah.
Well,
And
this
and
is
I'm
great.
I'm I'm
This
just
is
about
great.
done with snow.
And I'm so glad that you've got this JSC internship because you're right there seeing how it's going to get implemented and
Yeah,
how Johnson Space Center and the NASA folks are looking at all of these details and building. So a lot of times, we see the sexiness of SpaceX, and we see, Virgin Galactic and all the bigwigs doing
yeah,
their special suits and suit designs. But when it comes to NASA and, let's be honest, like Roscosmos in Russia
mm,
and some tried and true for sure suits, they might not be pretty, they might not be sexy, but they've been around a long time and that
yeah.
they're efficient, they work. And I one thing we didn't get into, which wouldn't be fair to put you on the spot and ask you, but I'm gonna ask you.
Okay.
Um, Spacesuits are expensive, just
Yeah.
like all parts of space exploration right now. Are they
Mm.
going to be less expensive as we continue to build, and or is it going to be like, no, they're always going to be expensive because they truly are something that's just going to be part of your space experience?
Yeah, yeah. Well, so I think the price is definitely going to come down, and I think a big part of that is the contracts that just went out for the new spacesuits. And because so when you introduce competition into a field like
Yes.
space, you see the prices come down a lot.
Yeah.
And so if you look at previous contracts that NASA has done for commercial cargo, where they were resupplying the space station to commercial crew, where they're sending capsules with astronauts up and down from the space station. You see that the prices are coming down, pretty significantly, and we're just starting to kind of reap the benefits of those programs. So I think NASA is really smart about employing a wide variety of companies to kind of build this base of spacesuit expertise. So then you have these companies competing and innovating and creating amazing designs that will kind of constantly, hopefully, be one upping each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah,
Um,
evolve, get a little less expensive.
yeah, yeah, like
Oh,
more, less
good.
expensive, safer, more mobile.
Yeah.
I
Good.
uh,
I want one. Actually,
yeah.
you know what? I think the analogs would love to have those old hand-me-downs,
Oh
even
yeah.
as bulky and crazy as they would be and uncomfortable. But I mean, they really do feel and help you get your mind around. People who do analogs will, I'm sure you can speak to this too. It's
Mhm.
like, what do you explain this to everyday friends and neighbors when you come back home? Wait, what now? You were playing space somewhere for 2 weeks with
Yeah,
strangers doing science, and you're like, yes, but when you're there and when you're in it and you put that suit on for real, you're like, all right, now I see why it takes 12 minutes in the padding the schedule just to get
yeah,
ready to go out the door, or 20 minutes, or it's like you understand when you start really stepping into it and having these things that you're going to tangibly experience. And you're like,
totally.
and then when, of course, you're wearing the suit, you're like, so wait a minute, we designed this EVA to just go out and pick up this rock and then put it in the sample container and bring it back in. I want to plant the flag. I want to get
Yeah,
driving around. I want to do the rover a little bit. You don't have time or energy
no,
to expend. And you're just amazed at how exhausted you are after you've done the simple task of a sample rock, and you come back in and you're
yeah.
like, I am done.
Yeah. Well,
And
and that, when you do an analog EVA, you're not even considering, how extreme an actual spacesuit preparation thing would, actually entail. Uh,
right.
because right now you have to pre-breathe, so you're in the suit for, over an hour,
Yeah.
just waiting for the
Yeah, you're
pressure.
still cutting corners, let's be honest. You're
Yeah.
still kind of not going through. And we pretend that we're going through the airlock and we sit and we wait for some time to pass, but it's nothing like what's really so
Yeah.
true. But Will, you are bringing us into the next generation of
Oh,
spacesuits. I
thank
know
you.
that people are going to want to find out more, and I know they're going to want to follow you in such cool activities that you're always posting, because I follow you and I'm loving it. And I've
Thanks.
learned so much today. So as people have questions they want to ask, where can they find you?
Sure. So I'm on Instagram, spacesuit_Will. I'm also on LinkedIn. If you type in Will Green, I'll probably show up. I'm the one
Awesome.
wearing the spacesuit.
Okay, that sounds great. That sounds great. Well, it's been such a pleasure. I wish you all the best as you wrap up your internship at NASA and your work with your PhD. I know we're going to be seeing you soon. Come back on the show anytime. Share with
Awesome.
us your updates and your research and your achievements. And then also, would you mind, if we do get some questions, can you be one of our suit experts and come on and walk us through?
Oh, sure, definitely. Yeah, no, this has been great. So
That would be
love to be
great.
back.
Okay, well, let us know where you land, and then I can't wait to wear one of your suits real soon in the future here.
Sounds good.
Well, thanks, Will.
Perfect.
Join us again soon, okay?
Yeah. All right. Bye. Thanks.
So, for